The Silent Awakening. In the dark corners of space, far beyond the reach of any known civilization, a forgotten fleet floated. It had been silent for millions of years. The ships, once mighty and proud, were now just ghostly shadows of their former selves, lost to time and memory. But one day, everything changed. A signal, faint and barely detectable, burst through the void of space, carrying with it a message that would shake the galaxy. This signal was not a natural occurrence. It was not a star dying or a comet passing by. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, was trying to make contact. The signal's origin came from deep within the abandoned human fleet. As the message spread across the stars, it caught the attention of the Galactic Empire, a powerful force that controlled vast stretches of space. They had long believed that the human race had vanished, wiped out by the forces of time and war. But now, this unexpected signal threatened to unravel everything they thought they knew. The Empire's leaders were shaken. They had ruled with an iron fist for centuries, their ships dominating the stars, their soldiers feared by all. The humans, as they knew them, were a distant memory, an ancient people whose rise had once seemed unstoppable, only to be snuffed out by the galaxy's other powers. But this signal spoke of something far worse than the ancient mythic stories told in hushed tones. It spoke of a human fleet, alive, hidden, and ready to awaken. Captain Torin was one of the first to receive the message. He stood in the control room of the Empire's flagship, his eyes narrowed in disbelief as he stared at the blinking lights on the holographic screen. The signal was too strong to ignore, but the content was something that only a few had dared to speculate about. The humans had returned. "This can't be real," Captain Torin muttered to himself, running a hand through his dark hair. His crew watched him anxiously, unsure of what to say. For years, they had operated under the belief that humanity was no more. Their archives had no records of human activity beyond 1,000 years ago, and nothing since then. The Empire's dominance had been unchallenged, and now this signal had turned everything upside down. The admiral on the ship's comm stood silent for a moment, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. His voice, when it came, was cold and calculating. "Prepare the fleet. We need to know what's out there. Set course for the source of the signal." The Empire's warships, massive and intimidating, began to shift into formation, their engines roaring to life. It was a well-practiced maneuver, one they had used countless times before when responding to potential threats. But this time, there was a nervous energy in the air. The humans were a mystery, and no one knew what kind of power they could still wield after all these years. As the ships made their way to the source of the signal, the rest of the galaxy remained unaware of the approaching danger. Civilizations far and wide continued with their daily lives, unaware of the threat that was about to awaken from the past. The humans, forgotten for so long, were coming back. On the human fleet, the once silent ships began to stir. Inside the ancient vessels, long-dead systems slowly powered back on, one by one. Forgotten crews, stored in cryo-sleep for millennia, were beginning to wake, their memories clouded by the passage of time. They were no longer the warriors they had been in their prime, but their instincts were still sharp. The battle-ready minds of humanity began to rise again. The human fleet had once been unstoppable. It had been designed to conquer, to fight, and to defend humanity's place in the stars. Now, after eons of silence, it was returning. But why? And how? Inside the flagship, the commanding officer, General Cora, was standing by her own control console. Her fingers flew over the holographic panels, reviewing the fleet's data. The awakening was far from perfect. Many ships were still dormant, their systems failing to restart. But a few had come online, their weapons systems scanning, their engines sputtering to life. The general felt a chill down her spine. She knew that this moment could change everything. This fleet was more than just a relic. It was humanity's last chance to rise again. The silence of space seemed to grow deeper with each passing moment. As the human fleet continued its slow, methodical reawakening, The Empire's ships approached the location of the signal. The space ahead of them seemed empty, devoid of anything but the cold void. The silence of space seemed to grow deeper with each passing moment. As the human fleet continued its slow, methodical reawakening, the Empire's ships approached the location of the signal. The space ahead of them seemed empty, devoid of anything but the cold void. Then, just as the Empire fleet was about to pass into the region where the signal had been sent from, the silence broke. A massive, ancient warship appeared out of nowhere, its hull gleaming with faded light. The ship was massive, far larger than anything the Empire had ever encountered. It moved slowly, as if waking from a long sleep, but its weapon systems were clearly online. It was a human ship, alive again. The Empire's fleet paused, weapons systems coming to life, a sense of shock rippling through their ranks. Captain Torin's voice crackled over the comms, disbelief in his tone. This is impossible. And yet, the impossible had happened. The human fleet had returned. But the galaxy was not ready for what would come next. As the first few ships began to awaken and rise for battle, the questions began to swirl. What had become of humanity during its long absence? Why had they returned? And were they here to reclaim what was once theirs? The galaxy was about to find out. The ancient fleet. The massive human warship drifted slowly in the cold expanse of space, its once glorious hull now weathered by centuries of neglect. The ship, dubbed Vigilant, had been the pride of the human fleet long ago. Its weapons had been feared across the galaxy. Now, after millions of years, it had awakened. But despite its age, it was not alone. Other ships, equally ancient, had begun to stir in the darkness, their systems flickering to life one by one. The Empire's fleet, still hovering in disbelief at the sudden appearance of the Vigilant, immediately adjusted their formation. Captain Torin, still processing the unbelievable situation, gave orders for his fleet to close in on the ancient human ship, weapons charged, ready to engage. Yet, a strange hesitation rippled through the ranks. How could something so old be so dangerous? It was a relic of a forgotten age, wasn't it? Inside the Vigilant, the human crew, still in cryo-sleep, remained unaware of their surroundings. But in the heart of the ship, the command center buzzed with activity. Systems began to hum as they slowly came online, powered by centuries-old technology that had once been the pinnacle of human engineering. The cold, mechanical voices of the ship's AI began to echo through the command halls, filling the silent void with the hum of activity. It was clear that the Vigilant wasn't the only one waking up. Around it, other ships began to show signs of life. The human fleet, though scattered and old, was slowly coming back together, like a sleeping giant slowly stirring from its long slumber. Their weapons were outdated, their shields weakened by time, but they still had the one thing that no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever understand: the will to fight. General Cora stood at the command console aboard the Vigilant, her hands trembling slightly as she surveyed the situation. She had seen the vastness of space, had fought in countless wars, but this was something else. She was looking at an empire, one that had dominated the galaxy for far too long, one that had wiped out her people's legacy, and she felt a burning desire to reclaim what was once theirs. But Cora wasn't foolish. She knew that this war would not be won with sheer will alone. The technology of the Empire was far superior, and their ships were far more advanced than anything the humans had left. The Vigilant and its allies were old, their weapons primitive by today's standards. But they had something the Empire didn't: experience. These ships had been through countless battles, and the crew, though rusty, still had their fighting instincts intact. The first communication from the Empire came as a loud crackle through the comm system, the voice harsh and demanding. "This is Captain Torin of the Empire fleet. You are in violation of galactic law. Power down immediately, or we will engage." Cora's eyes narrowed. She knew that this moment had been coming for a long time, but now that it was here, it was different than she expected. The humans had always been strong. their resolve unbreakable. But even now, after all this time, they still faced impossible odds. "Send them a message," Cora ordered, her voice steady but firm. "Tell them that humanity has returned. We are not their enemies, but we will not bow to them." A tense silence filled the room as the crew worked quickly to send the message. The Empire had never seen anything like it. The human fleet, thought to be dead and gone, was suddenly awake and ready to defend itself. But Cora knew that her fleet had just begun to awaken, and the Empire's response would be swift. The message was sent. The Vigilant's ancient guns, now slowly powering up, were locked and loaded. It was a warning, not just to the Empire, but to anyone who might dare to challenge the human fleet. Humanity had returned, and it was not going to be silenced again. On the Empire's flagship, Captain Torin watched as the human fleet began to slowly power up. The Vigilant was not just a warship. It was a symbol of the lost power that had once ruled the stars. But now, the galaxy's most powerful empire was about to learn the true strength of humanity's resolve. The Empire's ships prepared for battle, their engines igniting as they began to move toward the ancient fleet. But despite their superior firepower, there was something the humans had that the Empire didn't: the heart of a warrior that could never be extinguished. The ancient fleet, once forgotten, was rising, and the Empire, unprepared for the strength of this long-lost enemy, was about to learn that even the oldest of ships can carry the fiercest of spirits. The first battle was about to begin. The silent awakening had turned into a war cry, echoing through the stars, and the humans, though long absent, were determined to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The reawakening of humanity. The ancient warships of the human fleet drifted silently in space, their battle-scarred hulls slowly coming back to life. But inside the ships, the situation was more chaotic than anyone could have imagined. For the first time in millennia, the human crew began to stir from their cryo-sleep, their minds clouded and confused. They had been asleep for so long, and the years of their slumber had taken their toll. Memories of their past, of their victories and losses, were distant echoes. The awakening of humanity wasn't just about the ships coming online. It was about the people who had once commanded these ships. The humans who had survived in secret for generations now faced a difficult truth. They had been living in the shadow of a galaxy that had long forgotten them. Many had grown up on distant colonies, unaware of the massive fleet of warships that lay dormant in the depths of space. Their parents had told them stories, tales of a time when humans had been kings of the stars, only to fall in a great war. The fleet had disappeared, and with it, the hopes of reclaiming humanity's place in the universe. But now, all of that was about to change. General Cora, the commanding officer aboard the Vigilant, was one of the first to wake. As she opened her eyes, the familiar hum of the ship's engines filled her ears. She slowly sat up in her cryo chamber, rubbing her eyes, trying to shake off the fog of centuries-long sleep. The ship's AI, still a remnant of its former self, spoke to her in a monotone voice. "General Cora, you have awakened. The fleet is preparing for activation." Cora's heart raced. She had been a soldier in her past life, a leader who had fought for the survival of humanity. And now she was the one who would lead them back into the fight. She knew that this was no ordinary awakening. The message from the Empire, the sudden reappearance of the fleet, it was all a sign that humanity was being called back into the galaxy. And this time, they would not be silenced. As Cora made her way to the command deck, she passed by the sleeping forms of her fellow soldiers. Some were younger than her, others older, but all had been trained for this moment. The crew of the Vigilant had been chosen for their strength, their skill, and their loyalty to humanity. But now, they were unsure of the world they would awaken to. The galaxy had changed in the time they had been asleep. Outside, the stars seemed unchanged, but the threats they had once faced had evolved. The Empire, the one that had wiped out most of humanity's colonies, was stronger than ever. Their weapons were beyond anything the human fleet had ever seen. Cora had seen the battle reports. She knew that they would not be able to win with sheer numbers alone. They would need to rely on their cunning, their ability to adapt, and the very will that had once made humanity the dominant force in the galaxy. In the hold of the Vigilant, the other ships were coming online as well. The fleet, though ancient and outmatched, still had its firepower. The ships were relics, yes, but they had been built to last, and their weapons, though outdated, were still capable of causing destruction. Slowly, the ships began to align, forming up in a formation that had not been seen in centuries. Meanwhile, on the planet where the human survivors had lived in secret, there was a growing sense of unease. The descendants of the original human crew had known their history, and they had known that one day the fleet might return. But the reality of that moment was both exhilarating and terrifying. They were no longer living in the shadows. The galaxy had forgotten them for a long time, but now they had to face the truth. Humanity was about to fight for its place in the stars once again. Captain Lyra, a leader among the human survivors on the distant world of Elysium, was among the first to receive word of the fleet's awakening. She had grown up hearing the stories, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. She stood in front of a large monitor, staring at the flashing lights and the images of the fleet coming back to life. "They're really doing it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. "They've come back." Lyra knew that the survivors had no choice but to join the fleet. The galaxy had grown dangerous, and the Empire would not stop until humanity was once again erased from the stars. The time for hiding was over. The time for war had come. "Prepare the civilians," Lyra commanded, her voice strong. "We've waited long enough. It's time to join the fleet. It's time to reclaim our place in the galaxy." Back on the Vigilant, Cora had gathered her most trusted officers around the war table. The situation was dire, but the humans were not strangers to fighting against impossible odds. She looked each of them in the eye, and though they were uncertain about what lay ahead, they could feel the weight of history pressing on them. "We will not fall," Cora said, her voice unwavering. "We will rise again, not as forgotten relics, but as the warriors we were meant to be. The Empire thinks we are weak, but they are wrong. We have one thing they will never understand: the heart of humanity." The Vigilant's engines roared to life as the fleet slowly began to move, cutting through the darkness of space. The human fleet, lost for 1,000,000 years, was now ready to reclaim the galaxy. But the question remained: could they overcome the powerful empire that now ruled the stars? The answer, Cora knew, was simple. Humanity had survived for this long. They had no intention of being erased again. And the battle for the galaxy had only just begun. The enemy's response. The Empire's response came swiftly. Within hours of the human fleet awakening, their forces had begun mobilizing. The signal from the Vigilant had not only been a wake-up call for humanity, but also a signal flare for the Empire, a symbol that the last remnants of humanity were no longer content to hide. Their very existence threatened the Empire's domination, and they would not allow this to go unchallenged. Captain Torin's flagship, the Nemesis, a massive warship that could obliterate entire fleets with a single strike, was already at the front of the Empire's formation, leading the charge toward the human fleet's location. Torin, the captain, paced the command deck, his thoughts racing. He had led countless missions, faced many enemies, but something about this was different. The humans had been written off as a lost cause, a people defeated and erased from the stars. But now they were here, and their return felt like a challenge, one that could unravel the entire galaxy's power balance. "Deploy all scouting vessels," Captain Torin ordered sharply, his voice calm but filled with tension. "We need to understand what we're up against." The scouting vessels, smaller ships designed for reconnaissance, launched from the flagship and scattered across the void of space, their sensors scanning the human fleet. The results were unsettling. The Vigilant and its sister ships had clearly powered up, but there was a strange lag to their readiness. These ships were old, far older than anything the Empire had ever encountered. Their weapon systems were not as advanced, and their shields seemed weakened by the passage of time. Yet there was a deep sense of caution in the air, a nagging feeling that these ancient ships might hold surprises no one had accounted for. "This is madness," one of Torrhen's officers murmured. "The humans were wiped out. How are they still a threat?" Torrhen turned to face the officer, his expression grim. "They were forgotten, yes, but never fully erased. We underestimated them once. We won't make that mistake again." Despite the fears, the Empire's fleet moved forward, determined to squash this resurgence before it could even take root. They had no intention of letting humanity rise from the ashes. The Empire had built its power over millennia, and a ragtag fleet of old warships would not threaten their rule. Torrhen's fleet was equipped with cutting-edge technology, an army of elite soldiers, and firepower unmatched across the stars. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were not as helpless as they. Meanwhile, on the Vigilant, General Cora was fully aware of the impending threat. She had been studying the movements of the Empire's fleet through the ship's ancient systems. Despite their age, the Vigilant had never lost its ability to track enemy movements, and the fleet's old combat algorithms were slowly coming online. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and still shaken by their centuries of sleep. But there was something they had that the Empire could never understand: the will to fight. As the Empire's ships grew closer, Cora gathered her officers in the command center. She knew that this would not be a simple battle. Their enemies would not wait for them to rebuild their strength. The fight would come soon. "We don't have time to waste," Cora said, her voice steady but urgent. "We have to act now before they overwhelm us." "We could wait," one of her officers suggested. "Let them come closer. We don't need to engage until they're within range." Cora shook her head. "No, we need to show them that we're ready. We may be old, but we still have enough power to fight. It's time to remind the galaxy that humanity's heart has never stopped beating." The crew of the Vigilant moved quickly, preparing the ship's weapon systems. The ancient battleships of the fleet were awakening one by one, and as each ship powered up, they took their positions in formation. Their numbers were few, but their spirits were fierce. In the distance, the Empire's ships came into full view, their massive forms dominating the black sky. The fleet moved forward with the might and arrogance that came with being the most powerful force in the galaxy. They did not fear the humans. They saw them as a forgotten species, one that had no place in the modern galaxy. The humans had never stood a chance before, and now they were even weaker. But as the Empire's ships drew closer, something unexpected happened. The Vigilant fired its first shot. The ancient cannon, though rusted and worn, unleashed a burst of energy so powerful that it tore through the void, striking the nearest scout ship with such force that it exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The Empire fleet paused, stunned by the sudden ferocity of the attack. "Impossible," one of the Empire officers gasped. "Their weapon systems shouldn't be able to fire." The humans, though out of practice and severely outmatched, had not forgotten how to fight. They were a dying breed, but their spirit, their drive to survive, still burned bright. This was their home, their galaxy, and they would not let it fall to an empire that had erased their people's legacy. General Cora watched the explosion from the bridge of the Vigilant, her eyes cold and determined. She knew this was only the beginning. The Empire had responded, but they had underestimated the strength of humanity's will. It was time to take the fight to them. The humans had returned, and they were not just fighting for their survival. They were fighting to remind the galaxy who they were. The Empire had no idea what kind of war they had just started, preparing for battle. The sudden attack on the Empire's scout ship sent ripples of shock through both fleets. The Empire's arrogance had been shattered, but General Cora knew this was just the beginning. One shot wouldn't win the war. It was a reminder, a wake-up call. The Empire might have been stunned, but it wouldn't take long for them to regroup, reassess, and come at the humans with all their might. Inside the Vigilant, Cora and her officers worked tirelessly, their eyes glued to the command screens, calculating their next moves. The human fleet, though vast, was severely limited in its strength. The ships were old, and many of the weapon systems were unpredictable. The fleet had been dormant for so long that the crew's training was rusty, and many of the officers had never even fought in a battle. They had heard the stories, but for most, this was their first real war. They had to act quickly, or the Empire's overwhelming force would crush them before they had a chance to fight back. General, one of the officers, Commander Zane, called out as he reviewed the tactical data. The Empire's fleet is regrouping. They're deploying heavier ships now. We won't have long before they strike back with everything they've got. Cora turned to him, her eyes sharp. Then we won't give them the time. Prepare the fleet for full engagement. We need to take out their smaller ships first. We'll use our superior maneuverability to outsmart them. The Vigilant and its sister ships were far more nimble than the massive Empire warships. They had been designed to fight swiftly, outmaneuvering larger, slower ships with ease. Despite the rust and age, these ships still had that advantage. The human fleet would rely on hit-and-run tactics, using the element of surprise and speed to take down the smaller, less protected ships in the Empire's fleet. Cora's mind raced as she considered their strategy. It would be a long shot, but it was the only option they had. The Empire's warships were far superior in both firepower and armor, but if they could disable enough of their smaller ships, the larger fleet would be forced to hesitate. The humans could then use that opening to strike at their most vulnerable targets. They might not win in terms of strength, but they could win in terms of strategy. We have one advantage over them, Cora said, looking out at the fleet's ships coming online one by one. They may have the numbers, but we have the heart. We fought for survival all our lives. We've been forgotten, but now we fight for everything we've lost. The officers around her nodded. Their resolve had been tested by years of isolation, but now it was time to stand tall and fight back. Across the fleet, the human crews prepared for battle. The ancient ships, still humming with the whir of old engines, were being readied for combat. The Vigilant's cannons were primed, its energy shields flickering to life. Though the ship's systems were far from perfect, the crew knew that this would be their one chance to prove their worth. Every officer, every soldier on board was determined to show that humanity's spirit was stronger than the Empire's might. Meanwhile, the Empire's forces were preparing their own counterattack. Captain Torrin stood at the helm of the Nemesis, his eyes fixed on the screens displaying the human fleet's movements. He couldn't understand why the humans had attacked so recklessly. The fleet they had awakened was nothing compared to the Empire's power, but Torrin knew better than to underestimate an enemy, especially one that had managed to survive for so long in the shadows. All ships prepare for engagement, Torrin ordered. We'll crush them quickly and end this nonsense. They think they can take on the Empire. We'll show them what real power looks like. The Empire's massive ships moved into position, their engines glowing brightly as they prepared to open fire. Their weapons were powerful enough to decimate entire fleets, but they had one critical disadvantage. Their ships were slow. The humans would not meet them head-on. They would dart in and out, striking when least expected. On the Vigilant, Cora knew that the time had come. The fleet was in position, and their attack would begin soon. Her voice rang out across the command deck. Engage. The human ships moved forward in tight formation, their smaller, faster vessels darting ahead to harass the enemy's flanks. The Vigilant led the charge, its cannons firing in quick succession, targeting the Empire's smaller ships. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as the humans struck swiftly, their shots deadly despite the age of their weapons. The Empire's smaller vessels were caught off guard, and several of them were obliterated in the first few moments of the battle. But the Empire wasn't going to let the humans get away so easily. They responded with overwhelming force, their larger ships opening fire with devastating lasers and missiles. The human fleet, outgunned and outnumbered, was pushed back, but Cora and her officers fought on with unrelenting determination. "We can't hold them off forever," Zane said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need reinforcements, General." "Not yet," Cora replied, her eyes fixed on the battlefield. "We need to keep them distracted. The longer we fight, the more time we buy for the rest of humanity to wake up and join us." The human fleet was outmanned and outgunned, but they weren't fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for their future, for their place in the galaxy. Each blast, each maneuver was a testament to the strength of humanity's resolve. They had been forgotten for too long, but now they had returned to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. As the battle raged on, General Cora knew that the outcome of this fight would determine the future of humanity. The Empire had underestimated them once before, but this time, the humans weren't going down without a fight. And as the first wave of reinforcements began to arrive from the farthest corners of the galaxy, Cora felt a surge of hope. Humanity might be small in number, but they had something no empire could defeat: the courage to rise against impossible odds. The battle had only just begun. The battle begins. The battle raged across the cold, empty expanse of space, and the human fleet, though outnumbered, fought with a ferocity that sent shockwaves through the Empire's forces. The Vigilant led the charge, firing its ancient weapons with precision, while the smaller, nimble ships darted in and out of enemy lines, hitting their targets with devastating speed. Each blast, each attack, was a reminder to the Empire that humanity had returned, and they were not going to go down without a fight. The Empire's larger warships retaliated, their massive cannons firing with overwhelming force, lighting up the darkness of space with flashes of destruction. Explosions rocked the battlefield as the Empire's superior firepower tore into the human fleet. But despite the overwhelming odds, the humans held their ground. They had trained for moments like this, though many of the younger crew members had never experienced real combat. But their leaders, General Cora and her officers, were veterans of countless wars, and they knew how to use the fleet's advantages to their benefit. "We need to draw them in," Cora commanded, her voice unwavering. "Keep the pressure on their smaller ships, but don't engage the larger ones directly. Let them come to us." The humans had to play to their strengths. They knew that a direct confrontation with the Empire's heavy warships would result in their defeat, but they could take out the Empire's smaller ships, cripple their support, and weaken the larger fleet's ability to fight. The humans would need to be strategic, not reckless. Cora's words rang in the ears of the crew as they engaged in a deadly dance of destruction. The Vigilant fired again, its lasers piercing through the dark void and striking the hull of an Empire destroyer, causing it to shudder and explode. The human fleet continued to strike fast and hard, hitting the Empire's smaller vessels before darting away out of reach. But the Empire was no stranger to war. Captain Torin, standing at the command center of the Nemesis, watched in growing frustration. The human fleet, though outmatched, was proving difficult to pin down. Their ships were agile, their tactics unpredictable, and they fought with a desperation that was hard to ignore. It wasn't what Torin had expected. He had believed the humans to be an ancient, weak force, ripe for destruction. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that this would not be a simple victory. "We need to end this quickly," Torin said, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding before him. "Deploy reinforcements from the Second Fleet. We cannot let them drag this out any longer." Torin's orders were swift, and the second wave of Empire ships entered the fray, their massive forms swarming into the battle. The smaller human ships were now overwhelmed. The Empire's tactics were brutal, and their numbers were vast. Yet the humans still fought with everything they had. Back on the Vigilant, General Cora could feel the tide turning. They were holding their own, but the Empire's reinforcements were beginning to take their toll. The human fleet's shields were beginning to falter, and their ammunition was running low. The time for hit-and-run tactics was coming to an end. The Empire was closing in, and they were ready to crush whatever resistance remained. But Cora wasn't going to let the battle end this way. She had one final move in mind: a desperate play that could either win them the battle or ensure their destruction. "All ships," Cora commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "Prepare for the final maneuver. We'll take out their command ship, the Nemesis. It's the heart of their fleet. If we can destroy it, the rest of their forces will fall apart." Her officers exchanged looks of uncertainty, but they trusted Cora. She had led them through countless obstacles, and now they would follow her into the heart of the storm. The fleet shifted, repositioning itself as the human ships began to make a bold dash toward the Empire's flagship, the Nemesis. It was a dangerous move, one that could easily lead to their own destruction, but Cora was determined. The Nemesis was the key to the Empire's strength. If they could take it down, they might just have a chance to win this battle. With the fleet in motion, the humans made their move. The Vigilant and its allies darted toward the heart of the Empire's forces, their cannons blazing as they closed in on the Nemesis. But the Empire's defenses were swift to respond. Massive energy blasts shot out from the Empire flagship, slamming into the oncoming human ships and forcing them to veer off course. "Keep pushing," Cora shouted. "We're almost there." The Vigilant took the brunt of the assault, its hull buckling under the barrage, but it held strong, pushing forward with everything it had. The humans were closing in on the Nemesis, and Torin knew he couldn't let it happen. The Empire flagship's weapons systems powered up to their maximum capacity, ready to obliterate the incoming human ships. The final moments were a blur of energy blasts, evasive maneuvers, and desperate cries from the crews. As the human ships reached the Nemesis, the battle reached its climax. The Vigilant's cannons fired one last time, and a direct hit tore into the side of the Nemesis, causing a massive explosion that rippled through space. The Empire flagship staggered, its systems faltering as the massive warship began to list. The human fleet had struck the heart of the Empire's forces, but the battle was far from over. As the Empire flagship burned, the Empire's remaining ships retaliated with even more ferocity. The humans had succeeded in their bold move, but now they had to face the full wrath of the Empire's remaining forces. The fight was far from over, but one thing was certain. Humanity had proven that they would not go down without a fight. Victory or defeat. The chaos of battle filled space as the Empire's forces reeled from the destruction of the Nemesis, their flagship crippled and burning in the void. The explosion sent shockwaves through the Empire's fleet, and for a moment there was an unsettling silence. It was as if the entire galaxy held its breath, unsure of what would come next. The humans had dealt a devastating blow to the heart of the Empire, but the battle was far from over. General Cora stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, her hands gripping the command console as the battle raged around her. The destruction of the Nemesis had been a victory, but it had come at a cost. Her fleet was battered and broken, its numbers thinning with every passing moment. The humans had fought bravely, but the Empire's reinforcements were overwhelming. The question was no longer whether they could win. It was whether they could survive. "We can't hold them off much longer," Commander Zane said, his voice tense as he looked at the diminishing numbers of their ships. "The Empire is regrouping. They've still got firepower left. If we don't do something now, we'll be wiped out." Cora's gaze flickered to the battlefield, her mind racing. The Empire was regrouping, but they were not yet prepared to finish the job. There was still a window of opportunity, a chance to strike one final blow before their forces were completely overwhelmed. But it would be risky. The humans had few ships left, and their systems were on the brink of failure. But if they could disrupt the Empire's command chain one more time, if they could create enough confusion, they might just win this war. "We need to hit their command ships," Cora said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We've proven we can take down their flagship. We can do it again." The officers around her exchanged glances. They were worn, tired, but they had not come this far to lose now. One by one, they nodded, ready to follow their general into what could be their final battle. "We'll do it," Commander Zane said, his voice filled with determination. for humanity. The human fleet, now reduced to only a few remaining ships, adjusted its course, rallying together for one final push. The Vigilant and the remaining warships powered forward, moving with precision despite the odds stacked against them. They knew the Empire would be waiting, its fleet poised to strike, but the humans were not afraid. They had survived for 1,000,000 years, and they would not let the Empire extinguish their flame now. As the human fleet made its final approach toward the heart of the Empire's remaining forces, Captain Torin of the Empire's remaining ships watched with growing anxiety. The Nemesis was down, but the humans had shown an unthinkable resolve. They were pushing forward, their ships, though few, determined to strike at whatever was left of the Empire's power. "We can't let them get close," Torin said sharply, his voice cold with resolve. "Prepare to launch everything we have. No mercy." The Empire's ships charged, their weapons primed and ready to blast any human ship that came too close. The final battle was about to begin, and it would be one of annihilation. The humans, however, had learned from every moment of this fight. They had been underestimated, and now, as they closed in on the Empire's remaining ships, they unleashed everything they had. The Vigilant fired its main cannon with a fury that sent shockwaves through the void, striking an Empire destroyer with pinpoint accuracy. The smaller human ships darted in and out of the Empire's defensive perimeter, using every advantage of their speed and maneuverability. The Empire fought back, launching waves of energy blasts, missiles, and laser fire. The air was thick with the sound of explosions, the harsh cries of ships breaking apart. The human fleet was small, but it moved with the precision and coordination of a force far greater than the sum of its parts. General Kora's eyes narrowed as the final moments of the battle approached. They were close, too close. The remaining Empire ships were scattering, attempting to flee, but they were being hunted down one by one. The humans were relentless. "We have them on the run," Kora said, her voice low, but with a note of fierce satisfaction. "Finish this." The human fleet surged forward, closing in on the last of the Empire's command vessels. In one final, coordinated attack, the Vigilant and its allies launched their remaining missiles and fired their last remaining shots. The remaining Empire flagship, attempting to escape, was struck from every direction. Explosions erupted as the ship's core exploded in a blinding flash. The battle, which had seemed unwinnable just hours ago, was over. A stunned silence filled the vast emptiness of space. The Empire's fleet had been shattered. The remaining Empire ships turned and fled, their once proud vessels limping away from the battlefield, their spirits broken. The humans had won, but victory had come at a cost. The human fleet, though victorious, had lost many ships, and the toll of battle was evident. The Vigilant, battered and scarred, drifted in space, its engines faltering. But it was still alive, and so was humanity. General Kora stood on the bridge, staring out at the empty space before her, the remnants of the battle hanging in the air like a fading echo. Her people had fought against the odds, against an empire that had once wiped them out, and they had won. Humanity had returned, and they had proven that they would never be erased again. The victory was bittersweet. There was still much to rebuild, much to reclaim. But for the first time in 1,000,000 years, humanity stood on the brink of a new era. The galaxy would never forget the day that the human fleet rose from the ashes and reminded everyone that humanity's spirit could not be broken. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's future had only just begun.